Hi, Matt. So thank you so much for joining us today for this interview with Asian Downstream Insights. So perhaps to start off, we could just help you tell us a little bit more about Honeywell, as well as what you do.
Yeah, hi, Natalie. Firstly, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here and to be able to, I guess, share some of the latest that Honeywell is doing in terms of sustainability and how it impacts mining and petrochemical sector. Yeah, many of the participants may know Honeywell. As an industrial software and technology provider, we've been providing innovative solutions across a broad range of industry needs, for over 100 years. As we like to say, we're in the business of shaping the future. So our catch cry is future shapers, and that's certainly something that we're really proud of, and something that we work closely with industry to indeed try and attain. And certainly when we talk about sustainability, I guess that is in many industries the future of that industry. And so we're obviously heavily focused on what our offerings, both products, technology across and software across those industries might do. Our industries that we operate in, so we're structured across aerospace, building technologies, performance materials and technologies, and safety and productivity solutions. We're also pretty proud that we've recently launched 2 dedicated business lines purely focused on sustainability. One is our Sustainable Technology Solutions business, which sits as a part of our PMT organization, and the other is Sustainable Building Technologies. So areas where we think we have a real strong offering and differentiated offering, and can bring some real insights into those industries from a sustainability perspective. My role, Natalie, I'm the Vice President for UOP across Asia Pacific, based often in Kuala Lumpur. Again, many of the participants may know UOP as a pioneer in the refining and petrochemical industry. We are a technology licensor, product and equipment partner for many of the operators and producers across the region. We were one of the pioneers of the refining industry, and we are also pleased to be able to be a pioneer in terms of providing sustainable solutions to the refining and petrochemical industry.
Of course, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about what a typical, sorry, just a second. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what a typical day in your life is going to look like, and what are some of the, sorry, let's try this one more time. Sorry, the office is really crowded today.
No, right.
So what does a typical day in your life look like? And what are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to your role?
Yeah, so look, no doubt over the last few years, one of the biggest challenges has been the inability to travel and meet with our customers face to face. But fortunately, this year things have opened up, and so as a result of that, we've been really driving face-to-face engagement with our customers across the region to be able to really sit and listen to the changes in their drivers that have occurred over the last few years. I think, as COVID hit, the energy transition really accelerated, and many of the plans which were in place kind of pre-COVID, I think were kind of put to a side, and with the renewed focus on sustainability and energy transition, a new set of opportunities and drivers for many of the producers across the region opened up. So we're spending a lot of time with our customers really understanding what they need from us as a technology license provider, as well as how we can help them to develop their transition roadmap. So, the first step is often the hardest. So how do you determine where to invest your money? What's the biggest bang for the buck in terms of, dollars per metric ton of CO2 abated? And we can offer those things through workshops that we've been spending a lot of time undertaking with our customers to try and help them, at least from our perspective, give them the views around, where to look to spend the effort to try and reduce carbon emissions for their operations.
Right, okay. And, when we look at the current state of the refining and petrochemical industry today, what are some of the key concerns for refiners? And, is this affected on a regional level? Does it differ from region to region?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does differ from region to region. I think, like the world at large, the refining and petrochemical industry has really had a pretty tumultuous last couple of years. There's been a significant number of global events which have created significant regional impacts. Initially there was a start of an economic slowdown, then COVID hit, and more recently we have the conflict ongoing between Russia and Ukraine. And as I mentioned earlier, really, I think with COVID hitting, it did create this environment where a lot of people sat back and said, what's the environment that I want to live in? What is my well-being? How do I impact the well-being of myself and the broader population? And as a result, I think that really has accelerated the view of the energy transition and brought into focus climate change. And so I really do think that a lot of refiners and petrochemical operators have really stepped back and looked at that and said, okay, as an industry, what do we need to do to try and help accelerate the energy transition? And it's quite interesting because, when you talk about it from a regional perspective, actually, our region in Asia is probably one of the regions where we do still see there an expectation of kind of rising fuel demand or growing fuel demand over the next 10 to 15 years. But because of the desire to ensure that that is implemented in a way in which emissions are reduced, it is creating some kind of doubt around those expansion plans. So when you're looking at an investment, you're not looking at the next 5 to 10 years, you're looking at the next 15, 20, 25 years, and changes across in legislation that may occur in that time frame from an emissions restrictions and carbon pricing need to be considered in those decisions. So we're seeing this kind of dichotomy at the moment of a macroeconomic view of increased demand across our region, but because of likely legislation and other measures that are going to take place in the not too distant future, there is a bit of a challenge to be able to put forward a strong business case for those larger investments. I guess the other thing for our region to take note of is that we do have a large presence of national oil companies across Southeast Asia also. All the ASEAN countries are signatories to the Paris Agreement. So everyone's signed up to doing their part to reduce the impact on global warming and reducing emissions. And as such, I think, national oil companies are also looking at, well, it's a government directive. How do we, what do we need to do from our perspective to invest the national funds in terms of reducing emissions? So, there is a big pressure there as well to make sure that emissions are significantly in focus, even though we don't yet have legislation to kind of drive some of those investments.
Right. And you talk about the energy transition. So let's talk a little bit about Honeywell. And, I understand that there's quite a range of solutions and services offered from, well, industrial and manufacturing all the way to cybersecurity. Could you tell us a little more about these offerings and, how significant they are on the industry, especially in this age of the energy transition?
Right. Yeah, look, I mean, one of the reasons we created the Sustainable Technology Solutions business as a part of PMT really was because we did already have a number of technologies which can be deployed to reduce emissions or to support a circular economy. Our eco-fining technology that can produce renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel, we developed that a long time ago. So albeit at that time, there wasn't so much of a market demand, but we've certainly seen a significant uptick in the last couple of years around renewable fuels, partially driven by, airline industry's commitment to reduced emissions. And so, again, even without incentives being present in the market in Asia, at least, we do see a significant amount of interest to be able to produce sustainable aviation fuel to support the airline industry, which is, recovering across this region also. So that's obviously one of our core offerings and something that we've been, providing that technology for many years. The other area, which is not new to us and we've been doing for more than 40 years, is carbon capture. We have a broad suite of CO2 capture technologies, which we've been deploying across those last 40 years for many operators. We're really now just looking at deploying that in slightly different ways, rather than capturing it and using it for other purposes, now looking at it for either utilization or sequestration. And so for us, deploying our carbon capture technology, it's nothing new. It's perhaps just on different streams. Our post-combustion carbon capture is a new offering. So recently supplemented our pre-combustion carbon capture with post-combustion carbon capture through an advanced solvent technology. And we're actively deploying that technology around the world at the moment as well, which is, again, one of the key routes to decarbonising many industries, is being able to deploy post-combustion carbon capture. We're also looking at utilising that technology to be able to allow operators to produce a blue hydrogen stream, incorporating some of the various suite of our CO2 capture technologies into the hydrogen plant allows them to effectively produce a blue hydrogen. And that's something that is obviously of a lot of interest to many of the refiners, and in fact is one of the best ways to reduce emissions through the ability to capture the CO2 off the hydrogen plant. We've got a few new offerings as well. We've recently started licensing our upcycle technology, which is our plastic circularity technology. So taking plastic waste streams and converting them into an RPF product. We're very proud to have announced some of those licenses very recently into the market. We continue to see a large amount of interest in plastic circularity as a way to, remove plastics from the environment, as well as to offset some of the feed streams into, olefins production process. And then I guess our newest technologies are around a green hydrogen catalyst coated membrane. So providing the membrane into the electrolyzers, we see as, obviously a key part to helping to drive down green hydrogen production costs, and we want to be a part of that solution. And then in the area of renewable energy, we also have a flow battery offering, which uses everyday materials to be able to create a battery storage system, which can draw down over 12 or 24 hours, as opposed to a 4-hour drawdown time for a lithium-ion type battery stack. So it does create a solution which doesn't rely on rare earth materials to the same extent that you require for lithium-ion. So that's within our STS business, and it's certainly one of the focus areas for us when we engage with the refining and petrochemical industry. The other part is really across our software and automation line. We've recently released in terms of methane emission monitoring and real-time reporting. Methane has a much higher greenhouse gas emissions factor than CO2. So being able to reduce methane emissions, fugitive methane emissions from facilities, can also have significant impacts on your emissions to the environment. So we've released that to the market recently. It also has a visualization of those emissions through hyperspectral cameras, and it's really a sight to behold. Across our productivity automation tools, we also have Forge Worker Assist, which helps operators in the field by visualizing and being able to access information to improve visibility. And one other area we're doing a lot of work on at the moment is also remote operations. So centralizing facility operations into a single point to be able to improve productivity. And this all really helps in terms of reducing downtimes or process upsets in operations. And obviously, quite often when you look at emissions, a lot of those emissions to the environment come about through process upsets and through downtime. So being able to avoid those can have a significant impact on every operator's emissions to the environment.
Right. Thank you for sharing that with me. And we really do see that you have quite the expansive range of offerings there. So I think it's true in the sense that, now we're focusing very strongly on maximizing efficiency, minimizing downtime, as you said, So this comes in a lot under the OpEx, the operations side of things. But of course, I want to draw some of your attention back to what you mentioned about renewable fuels and how, we see an increase in the uptake, so to speak. But in Asia, in the ASEAN region, we still see that let me try that again. But in the ASEAN region, we also still see that fossil fuels are still in relatively high demand. So how can refineries find the balance or strike the balance between these two? And how do we go about it?
Yeah, look, I think one of the keys is to also, at the moment, refining margins are really good and really high. And I think this also creates an opportunity for operators in the short term, whilst they're enjoying, highly profitable businesses, to also then look to diversify the business to kind of future-proof it as they look to 2030 and beyond. So one of the things we are certainly seeing is, a lot of the investment plans currently looking to diversify the product portfolio to the renewable fuels portfolio or recycled or circulated plastics products. So I think most operators are already seeing that they need to be looking beyond current operations to kind of future product demand and starting to position for those future product demands. That's not to say, as I mentioned earlier, that in our region, there will still continue to be relatively high fuels demand as we have a growing population and an increasing middle class and an increasing level of automation and transport requirements across the region. So I think with that, there is kind of opportunities on both fronts, both from in the traditional sense, as well as with some of the new products. But that is to say, Natalie, we also have a large suite of offerings around what we call sustainability in our core technologies or in the core technologies, because I mentioned in an energy transition, what is that first step is quite often, the difficult decision to make. And so, we're working with our customers around those core technologies within their existing refinery petrochemical operations to look at, well, how do we play a role in improving the emissions and efficiency of those existing units, and what can we bring to those customers to help them do that? So again, that is a large part of what we do at the moment, in addition to kind of the new products around within our STS portfolio. A large part of what we're doing with our customers is looking at existing operating units and helping them to improve efficiency, both through our automation and software platforms, as well as our technology licensing portfolio, equipment that we also have in terms of improving heat transfer or liquids contacting, and other technologies that we can bring to bear. So really, I think, most operators are looking at in those respects, what portfolio do I need for the future, and how do I future-proof my existing operations that I currently have through, looking at ways to remove emissions from those existing operations.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's true that we have to future-proof the industry, and I think that's a big part of where the industry is going. So especially now that we are navigating this post-pandemic era, what are some of the changes and trends that you might have observed? And in your opinion, what should operators prioritize in order to survive and thrive?
Yeah, so it really is a different world than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Refiners now, margins are pretty good in the short term. Petchem has kind of been a little bit patchy, but we think that in the short term, making hay while the sun shines is not a bad approach. To take the opportunity again to really bolster the capital to be able to invest in a diversified product portfolio going forward. So, it's very difficult to make an investment decision into a new renewable fuels project or a plastic circularity when, margins are not good and you're really under, cost pressures. So being able to, I guess, take advantage of the short-term opportunity to be able to create an environment to be able to invest in the future, I think is really advantageous. So I guess our view at the moment is to look to short-term measures to try and maximize production. So, is there, we launched new catalysts recently and other products where, you can perhaps utilize them on a fairly quick turnaround to be able to, generate short-term advantages. I think the second step is obviously, as we talked about, kind of future-proofing the existing operations. So really putting in place the roadmap for the existing operation around what do I need to do to continue to reduce emissions and remove emissions from my existing facilities. Because at some point, legislation will overtake the investment, and there will be, probably across much of the region, some degree of carbon pricing or legislation that has some sort of restriction on emissions. So being able to get in front of that and really having a clear plan to be able to address emissions throughout the operations, we think is really critical. So again, that's why we're doing a lot of work with our customers in terms of these workshops and supporting them through the development of those roadmaps. And thirdly, then once you've kind of got those two pieces in place, then obviously diversifying. I mean, looking at renewable fuels, plastic circularity, what other markets can we move into? Could we look to start producing hydrogen off any of our facilities for a blue hydrogen product for sale into different markets? So, looking at different sorts of products. I think that's also a key diversification of the industry, and certainly something that many of the operators are looking at. And then finally, thinking about, the expansion, because we do continue to foresee growth, at least in the fuel side and probably on the petchem side as well, from a demand perspective in our region. So, where does that investment need to go, into which countries? I mean, we're certainly expecting to see a localization of that demand and the supply side. So is there opportunities in particular markets to be able to add additional capacity on the supply side to be able to, take up that demand growth over time? So really kind of, we think about it in those 4 steps, take advantage of the short term, look at what we can do in terms of developing our roadmap to reduce emissions for our existing operations, look to diversify the portfolio, and then finally look at filling the medium-term demand gap.
Right. Thank you for sharing that with me. I think it's interesting that you've mentioned about diversifying the portfolio, because I think some of the feedback or some of the things that we've observed from people within the industry is that going forward, the oil and gas industry looks less and less like the oil and gas industry, especially with so much focus on the energy transition and sustainability and going green, so to speak. What's your opinion about that?
Look, I mean, we've seen a lot of name changes across the industry recently as well, in terms of being more focused on energy, on supplying energy, as opposed to supplying products. And I think that trend will continue. I mean, a lot of operators are really diversifying what they produce and what they sell to the market, as we are. I mean, Honeywell continues to evolve and continues to offer different products and different technologies to the market, and I think that's a logical movement that companies will move towards where the markets are. So if the demand is there for cleaner products and cleaner sources of energy and fuels, then operators will move there to be able to supply that market. So I think it's just a natural part of the transition that we're starting to see, the demand being there, that we all want to live healthier lives. We want to have healthier environments to live in. That's driving the demand side, and then, industry moving to fill that demand. So again, I think it's a natural progression of the industry.
Right. And where do you think the industry is going to be in, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think, obviously petrochemicals will continue to grow and to be a significant part of the demand. Whilst in our region, we will still see growth in transportation fuels, it will decline over time, eventually. And I think that, producers and the industry is kind of starting to think about that already. I mean, pivot to petchem is kind of not a new notion. I think many operators have been looking at it for the past few years. And there has been more investment in petrochemicals than there has been in refining over the last few years as a result of that. And I think we're likely to see that sort of trend continue, that there is likely to be more interest and more focus on the petrochemical market. I do think that the operators will continue to diversify themselves and integrate their refining and petchem assets to get the most out of their assets, because again, that flexibility to be able to move between, fuels to petrochemicals, I think is going to be even more important in the future as the petrochemical industry continues to grow and the refining and the demand on the fuel side starts to contract. So I think that we're likely to see, a broader petrochemical industry, probably a refining industry, which is more so there to support the petrochemical industry in terms of feedstock supply than purely just focused on transportation fuels, but also, a move to sustainable products. So, biofuels, e-fuels and other types of products that the industry can produce.
Of course. And, in this diversification, in moving forward with this energy transition, what are some of the challenges or roadblocks that you foresee the industry might hit? And, well, how do we overcome them?
Yeah, so look, it is a bit difficult to generalize on this one. I think each organization obviously has its own set of challenges and drivers to kind of meet their sustainability targets. I think from our perspective, one clear thing is the vision and the commitment. In this region, again, the legislation is only being implemented in one country at the moment in terms of a carbon pricing. That's not to say that it won't come, but I think in these early stages, it's really going to be up to industry to set the vision and drive the commitment. And that's something, I guess, from a Honeywell perspective, we're very proud of, that our CEO has announced last year that we're going to be carbon neutral by 2035 for all of our assets and facilities and operations. And so we've got a vision and we have a path to support that vision. So, for us, we've been successful in terms of reducing our greenhouse gas intensity by more than 90% from 2004. So we've made huge strides. We continue to kind of make it a part of our core operating system. We've delivered more than 6,000 projects which are focused on ESG outcomes, and 60% of our R&D actually goes to new products and portfolio which are ESG, driven by ESG outcomes as well. So I think it really does mean that you need to have the vision, we need to have the commitment as an industry, and we need to help drive towards this, even if the legislation isn't there yet in place, because we need to make sure our industry is future-proofed.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that.